can't see me, you Stevie. Wondering how I reach more evolutions than Evie and make it look easy.
What is up, Earth's mightiest subscribers? It's Blerd without fear. Welcome back to the channel. We have a special guest with us today, Luke Lieberman. Some of you may already be familiar with Luke. He is a writer of multiple different Red Sonja titles. One of the most recent ones that I actually just checked out, well, not terribly long, about a month ago, actually. Birth of the Devil. You've also done, was it Revenge of the Gods? Was it The Price of Blood? And like just a metric ton of Red Sonja. You've co-collaborated with Stan Lee on the Alliances series, both I think both comic and the because there was an Audible version as well.
It started as an Audible original, and then we went to print with Hart Mifflin Harcourt, and then we did a follow-up, Will Wheaton read for us at Audible, and then we did a graphic novel with Dynamite on that called Orc.
So yeah, like just all like literally just kind of hitting all the different bases. And I was curious to know too, because like, where did you get your start? Like, what's the origin story for Luke Lieberman?
Well, I went to film school at NYU. While I was there, I interviewed Stan for my junior year documentary. And then he gave me my first job in LA. So I moved from New York to LA to work for Stan for a little while. And then I took over Sonja in 2004, basically right before we launched. Like that was right before we launched with Dynamite. So that's my history, and my family's history goes further back. I mean, my dad controlled Conan and Red Sonja and the Robert E. Howard Library. So you know, that was my growing up. I grew up on this, you know. Yeah, Sonja's sort of more like my sister at some level. She's been there since I was born. Yeah. You know?
Which that's wild to me too, just because, you know, I think that's a very like unique perspective to have with, you know, a character that is like I would say is well known as Red Sonja to be just something like you literally have like skin in the game on it and grew up to you know to also, you know, get to tell your own narrative with it. Like
makes it easier to write because it's like I mean, at some level, always, yes, it's nice to come in with a fresh perspective on things. But for me, it's like whenever I think about what she would do in a particular situation, I just sort of know instinctively because I've always known her. It's sort of like, you know, you're writing something about your sister. You know what your sister would say. You know what she would do. Right.
Which, like I said, it was something I hadn't even considered prior, but like, it's like, yeah, dude, that's actually pretty awesome. It's like if you could go back and tell like younger you, like, hey, okay, this is what's going to be going down. Like, would you have believed it?
Yeah, and I've been pretty happy about it. I think, yeah, but yeah, I mean, I don't know. It was always kind of part of. It was just always in the family. And Conan was in the family too growing up. Obviously, we sold that off.
But is it with Dark Horse now?
No, I don't know. I don't think so. I think I don't think it's with Dark Horse anymore. But that's Dark Horse publisher. So you know, we dealt with Fred Malmberg as his group is ultimately who bought the Conan property. Yeah.
Like, and something I was curious about too, like, because Red Sonja is one of those things that, like, my introduction to Red Sonja as a kid was the movie. Like I had no idea that like, you know, she was an actual comic book character or anything like that until like I was a little bit older. But like even by that point, like I kind of came in stupid late to the game on Red Sonja, and something that I was always curious about, and I guess you'd be the perfect person to ask, is like for new readers who aren't as familiar with Red Sonja, like what would be your advice on?
Simple. We put together a book called The Best of Red Sonja, which pulls together all of her best stories going back 50 years. So that's the, like, if you really want to get into it, like a full jumping on point, that's got kind of a taste of everything, all the big writers that have reached her, you know, all that stuff.
Well, there'll be a link in the description for that as well.
Best of, I think it came out at the end of last year, I want to say. You know, it's been on the market for a minute, but not that long. But it's I was part of pulling that together with the team at Dynamite, and that is, I mean, that's the best, that's the cream of the crop that we could pull together. I mean, now sometimes you're dealing with one comic that was part of a longer story arc because we couldn't put the entire story arcs in this one book.
Right.
So you know, but you'll know about it, right? You'll see the first issue in the series and decide whether that's something you want to keep reading, because then you'll get a taste of everything. And
you also this was not too terribly long ago either, but I mentioned Birth of the Devil earlier, which is kind of like it's I guess I won't say exactly a prequel, but I mean it's telling an older story about Red Sonja from like
what I love. Okay, so two things. One is that actually ties in directly because it bookends this. It's sort of a like the actions that she took in Birth of a She-Devil. She's dealing with the consequences now in Death and the Devil, which is the series that we're talking about right now, the one that's coming out. So those things they're bookends. Those are directly related. Series. But what it's all exploring is a period of her life that I thought, because like you basically have like, you know, the tales of what happened to her when she was young, and then you skip to her being her, you know, being the sort of fully formed warrior, mercenary, badass. And I wanted to look at the period where she was becoming, you know, where she wasn't Red Sonja in full, you know, with full mastery of herself. She was in the process of becoming. And that's, you know, like her teenage years seem like, because also, you know, one of the things I liked about the character, I love about the character is that she's a little angsty. She's a little, emotional. Like she's can be a little impulsive. She's, you know, a little boozy. She's like very raw, but there's no more raw sort of emotional version you're gonna get than the teenage version. Like the sort of, and you know, I always like, you know, because also I came up understand. So I like characters that are flawed, that are struggling, and you know, she hasn't learned everything she needs to know yet. Like she's still making mistakes, you know. And it's not like the older version of the character is perfect or anything, but she's like she's much more the older version of the character has a better sense of herself and she's more seasoned. Like she's actually in battle situations and in political situations and things like that. Whereas here in this series and in Birth of a She-Devil, it was sort of her encountering all this stuff. You know.
That's what I really liked about it too, because that impulsiveness, like it kind of bites her in the ass. You know, it's one of those things
the
that,
whole
like,
book, the whole Death of a She-Devil is about her impulsiveness and birth in a She-Devil biting in the ass. That's like what's the premise. That's the premise of the book.
I like that aspect of it because it makes a lot of sense for a character, because you got to have something to help this character, you know, kind of, you know, get you on the journey. And like, I mean, I think, you know, being a flawed hero, you know, it's the most human thing that you could, you know, potentially be, you know, is a flaw to you. You think of, like, when you think of Red Sonja, like, when I think of, like, oh yeah, you know, badass warrior woman, but like badass warrior woman who, like, you know, she's still getting the job done, but you know, maybe she could have done it a different way that, you know, would have, you know, maybe caused her a little less, you know, I guess like BS, you know, along the way. Like I like that. That was actually what really kind of, you know, pulled me in on Birth of She-Devil. Like it was just, I was like, oh yeah, like it's like Red Sonja begins.
But also it's like the reason that she's making these mistakes. It's because sorry, as we're saying, here's the best of Red Sonja.
There you go. See, like right there. Which I love that cover too, by the way.
It's Jenny Frison. But yeah, it's in part because she's still figuring herself out emotionally, that she's making that. I mean, that's kind of part of where the impulsivity comes from, is that she's emotionally reacting to things instead of being wise and sort of thoughtful about her actions. She's not being wise or thoughtful. She's being raw, emotional, and she just takes action, which yes, she is always going to take action, but like, she's starting to learn that when you take an action, then shit flows out of that.
And then like, coming into this new series, like you said kind of like it's bookended, so it's, by the previous one, for people that have not maybe read the previous book, what has gotten her to this, like what's gotten her to this point? Where does she find herself, like kind of in the middle of the story?
So in Birth of a She-Devil, she always intended to kill this guy, but in Birth of a She-Devil, she kills the Sultan before he can even answer her questions.
Right.
She just, if you recall. And well, now you've killed the head of state. So what happens to this state, right? I mean, she just moved on, right? Because she was on her own quest. But eventually it, because the after she killed the Sultan, the rest of the country, power vacuum, warlords moving in, religious cults moving in, people fighting over the throne, and the common people are suffering because of it. She feels an obligation to try to rectify the situation. And of course, that doesn't go according to plan either.
For her, like, I already just kind of imagining, how she would respond to that situation. It's is just the idea of her dealing with that, and then like I know, kind of reading ahead a little bit that there's supposed to be like a new enemy that's you're going to be kind of bird dogging her, kind of following her trail. What can you tell us, without giving too much away? Like, what can you tell us about the new threat that's on the horizon for Red Sonja?
Dead people. Bloodless. He sees dead. I mean, Bloodless got his own origin in this, and he's. I mean, I literally picked the artist around who I thought could do a good job betraying, because he's the new character, and he's it's inspired by some of my favorite kind of, somewhere in between like Jim Jarmusch and Tim Burton and Sergio Leone westerns is like kind of the inspiration for this character. But he can also, his special abilities, he can talk to dead people. So, you can only get from them the last words that they spoke. So, but he can use that to kind of track what Sonja's doing, because she leaves a trail of dead people in her wake. And so he can figure out what she's been up to by just talking to the dead people that she left behind.
It's I can only imagine what the dead have to say about about dying at the hands of Red Sonja. Her enemies don't usually like her particularly much, so I imagine that it could make for some pretty cool instances. I think it was in Birth of the She-Devil, we saw like the return of like a classic character. Was it Ozius? Is there any like maybe plan or idea to like bring in other classic characters from like older Red Sonja?
Not in Death. We're introducing the new one in Death. And the artist that you mentioned, like I said, I kind of picked him around. I just wanted someone that could do a cool job with Bloodless, because like here's the thing: when you're launching a new villain, a new character, and obviously we do a lot of that in our books, but I wanted this one to stick. Maybe you could see again.
Yes.
Then there's got to be something special about it, right? And so I wanted someone. He did a Vampirella series that was really cool looking, and we basically hired him off of that. I mean, that was the look I wanted. I wanted something that felt a little Tim Burton-esque, and had that kind of fun, macabre vibe.
Well, I could definitely say you did a pretty good job picking the artist.
I've been doing it for a while.
Yeah.
You could have artists.
It's like, not the first rodeo, not the first rodeo. This series, if memory serves, it's going to be coming out this September 11th this year. It's going to run for like what, 4 or 5 issues. I know it was Birth of the She-Devil ran like I think it was like 4 issues, I think, or something like that. Somewhere in that neighborhood.
The 4 or 5, and this one will be 4 or 5. I don't remember. I was having fun writing it, so I just kind of,
honestly, that's the most important part.
These things always run kind of the nice thing about particularly doing like a limited series is that it can just sort of be what it needs, like what the story requires. You don't want to, I never want to be doing filler. I never want to be doing something where it feels like I'm just filling space in order to get to whatever the page count needs to be. And at the same time, it's like if you've got more to tell or if it's more comfortable, like you don't want a truncated story that's too tight and doesn't read well. So, it's the length of these things are just kind of whatever they need to be,
I will say it's something that, as a longtime comics reader, it was something that like I started noticing has become more common now. I mean, you still have like some of your ongoing series books that come out every month, whatever. But I've been noticing like the trend has kind of shifted more towards limited series, which at first I had a little bit of a knee-jerk reaction to when it initially started happening, but I've actually become more of a fan of it recently just because of what you just said, the fact that the story can be what it needs to be. You don't need to hit like a certain issue count number or
what, that's become a vibe across media. I mean that's a little bit of the streaming thing too, right? It's like the episode lengths, because they used to have to be, you've got 22 episodes in a network order and each of them have to be X number of minutes long, and that's the order, that's what you're filling. And now the order sort of just matches whatever the size of the show should be, like this episode needs to be 52 minutes and the other episode needs to be 41, then that's what it is. And that's kind of, now in comics you're still giving people 22 pages, I mean it's that much is the same. But in terms of how many issues you're doing or whatever, it's it's just a different vibe.
I mean, like I said, it was one of those things, I think, just because you get so used to something being a certain way, and it's like you're like, oh, this change. But like it was one of those things. Like, I was like, you know what? It actually makes more sense now. With the benefit of hindsight, I'm like, you know what? I'm actually okay with this because I mean, I would much rather have a 4 or 5 issue series that tells a good, solid narrative that's just fun to read, as opposed to like a 12 issue thing that feels like it kind of dragged for because I think that was a thing that like I've seen a lot across, like even
you don't want any kind of artificial element to the storytelling, right? You just want to tell the story. A good story well told works in any medium. And in order for a good story to be well told, I mean, part of how well told it is its pacing and exactly how much detail it does and doesn't go into, right? So, because you can't go jump down every rabbit hole in a story, like, they're not all that interesting.
Well, and I think it's also something to be said to like leaving people wanting something, and you can't just give the whole store away and like
if they're bored, if they're bored, you've already lost, right? Like, you never want to. I mean, that's what Stan, like I when I said the day I met him, I interviewed him, and he actually gave me some answers that I still go back to today, just from that interview. But one of the things I said, what makes a good storyteller? He said the ability to hold his audience's attention. Pretty simple.
Well, because if you lose it, then you're done. Like, that's and I feel like that's a very damaging. I think that's a very damaging encounter because that's like especially if it's like a first impression.
You're also taking people's money, and like if people are paying for something, you want to give them good. You want to give them something good, right? I mean, it's like I don't want to just fill pages. I want to give them something that's tight. And with Death, because I had the ability. I mean, you asked me how many issues, and I honestly don't even remember because I just wrote it. I wrote it like the length it needed to be, and I feel good about it. It's a strong story. And it examines in Sonja something else, which is besides just sort of the, killing the head of state and ramifications, it also examines death because Sonja, was sort of born through the slaughter of her family and the death and all that. And she's haunted by it, and she's also dealt a lot of it, and she's got a lot of blood on her hands, even at this age.
Yeah.
And part of her coming in, part of her growing up, coming of age, which are what these stories are about, is her sort of figuring out how she feels about all that, right? I mean, like, what does death mean to her? How comfortable is she taking it? Because here's a life she took. She took the life, and now she's having to clean up, what happened to the country after the fact. But also, in that now we have a character who speaks to death, right? I mean, the villain speaks to dead people. And I call him a villain. He's actually sort of more, sometimes you never quite know which hat he's wearing. Sometimes he's a villain, sometimes an ally. But because he's sort of seeped in death himself and he can speak to it from a different level, he can have a conversation, kind of engage with Sonja on that subject, that, and it's something Sonja needs to sort of meditate on the subject of death so that she can come to terms with it, because she never really came to terms with the death of her parents, right? She never really does at some level, but she needs to come to terms with the concept and the sort of finality of it.
I was gonna say, yeah, because she has I would definitely say probably one of the more tragic backstories out there. Whole family put to the sword, pretty much. And just kind of right in front of her, making her into the person that she ultimately is. Now, one thing you kind of mentioned earlier, talking about how she's not not quite at being like the Red Sonja that of legend. But I feel like that's almost kind of like a two-way street. Like, it's one of those where she's not quite where she needs to be, but maybe is there any kind of playing around with her enemies also don't realize exactly where she's at. That was is there any play with that?
Well, definitely, yeah. I mean, in Birth of a Shield, she was definitely underestimated a lot, right? Because she was a kid,
right?
And they didn't, and her legend is just sort of growing, and she had a bit of one. If you recall, even at the beginning of Birth of a Devil, they start by listing out all the crimes she's been accused.
She was known by name.
She's got a rep. She's got a street rep by the time it comes around, and she's still building a reputation. And I think with Bloodless sort of recognizes her, because he's a bit of a supernatural character. He recognizes her as the agent of death that she is. He understands how lethal she is. He sort of understands what he's dealing with. That doesn't mean anyone else does. I mean, there are definitely other characters that do not properly respect her and learn the hard way. That's for sure.
Hey, I love a good fuck around and find out. I love it. I don't know where this is at currently, but with everything that is kind of going on with Red Sonja, because I feel like just in the last probably last 5 to maybe 7 or 8 years, maybe even more than that, really. I feel like, man, Red Sonja's kind of been on a tear, just between multiple different series, crossovers, and
we announced the novel. We were in People Magazine this morning. Oh,
wow. So yeah, Red Sonja is literally now, actually, it feels even more official to say everywhere. So one thing I was curious about too, as far as future for Red Sonja, you see any more crossovers with her and Dynamite right now, in the future?
We've been talking about that. Nick and I, the publisher, has been talking about what crossover want to do next. It hasn't been announced. So yes, there's a crossover coming. We haven't announced it. I can't announce it here.
Yeah. We will.
No.
We won't make it hot. We won't make it hot. No. but it's good to know that, like, yeah, there's like I love, that's kind of one of the things I love about what's going on with Red Sonja right now, just because, you know, I feel like we're kind of I don't know if it's, maybe I could be wrong. I feel like we're living in peak Red Sonja times. Like we're getting like tons of good comics. You know, stories have all like just been great. Tons
There's a
of
movie coming.
Yeah,
I mean, I guess I'll tell you here,
yeah.
because everyone always asks where it's at. So we
That
just
was
did
my
the
next
final
question.
mix. We just did the final mix and the final color correction. I'm supposed to see next week. I'm supposed to see like a cut with all the FX and, you know, basically ready to show.
Okay.
It's going to go to, we have to show it to domestic distributors first. The foreign
Right.
distributors basically all in place. I will see if it's next week. I have a feeling it'll be the week after, I think, but we're there. I mean, it's like we're at the finish line with that project. And yeah, look, I've been working on this character, like I took over running this company in 2004, like right around the same time we launched Dynamite the next year. And Dynamite was a huge part of, you know, especially just, I mean, one, just expanding the storytelling and kind of detailing the character and allowing us to, because the Marvel stuff is legend, there's only so much of it. So it really needed, like, in order to really give the character depth and flesh it out and like just to take the character to the next level, you needed the breadth. I mean, we've done 100 graphic novels worth of material with Dynamite. That's a lot.
Yeah.
You know? There's been a lot of storytelling.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, now we've got a novel coming out at the end of this year, and the movie should be out some point next year. So yeah, I mean, it's the beautiful thing about characters in general, you know, because like Stan's characters have gone on for 60 years for Spider, right? It's coming
Still
up.
going
Yeah,
strong.
and stronger than ever, right? And what's beautiful is the way that each generation finds a way to kind of make these characters their own. And so when I took over the books, it was like I wanted to give the next generation, my generation, it's Red Sonja. And after me, someone will come along and take this thing over, and there'll be a new generation, like whatever the audience sort of, whatever that generation's like version of the character is. You know, Batman, there's a lot of different, and by the way, sometimes they work and sometimes they don't. Sometimes you like always have to keep the spirit and the authenticity of what made the character great. At the same time, you know, I mean, with Spider-Man, Miles Morales, a whole different character. So they, you know, at the same time, it's got the Spider-Man ethos. I mean, he's got a lot in common in terms of his struggle. There's differences, but there's also similarities, and there's the kind of core truth of the character that stays between, you know, and that's not just a different version of the character. That's a different character, but obviously he's tied in. You know, Peter Parker, there have been different versions of Peter Parker over the years. Batman, like, is he an angry vigilante? Is he a misunderstood billionaire? It depends on who you're talking to and who's telling the story, at what point in his arc and in his, you know, it's like different, you know. So I always look at these things as kind of like a prism, and they have they're multifaceted, and which way you look through the prism can determine what the character sort of looks like. You know, there's a core, there's the diamond, but there's also the different ways, you know, there's so many fractions, like there's so many fractal patterns that you can look at and sort of view the character through. And that's, you know, and then at some point someone will get it and they'll just turn it over and look at it a whole different way. You know,
my journey with Red Sonja is probably more relatively recent. I came in kind of like not at the start of her run at Dynamite, but like maybe a few years after. I might be misremembering, but it was whenever Gail Simone was on the book, and I just kind of kept in and out from there, like just kind of jumping in, peeking in, here and there. It's like, okay, oh, new Red Sonja story. Okay, cool. Let me check this out. You can pretty much pick up Red Sonja almost at any point, and I kind of feel like you're gonna get a character that is consistently the same character, but enough different that it feels like she at least grows. From writer to writer to writer. But I never feel like, oh, this Red Sonja is completely alien to me. I don't know who this is. I don't know who this person is. I never feel like that.
There's well, also I'm across all the writers, so
Mhm.
I'm if somebody's getting off the rails and not being authentic to the character,
Mhm.
we'll go a different direction at that point. But
Mhm.
there's a heart. There's a
Mhm.
heart to the character. There's a basic core to
Mhm.
Sonja, and they have to have that. Any of these characters that have lasted this long,
Right.
they have to have a strong, compelling core that connects to audiences. And that you can't, if they don't have that, then between the different iterations and stuff, it'll all just become incoherent. And ultimately, the character won't survive.
Mhm.
But in order for it to survive the test of time, as Sonja has, you have to have a strong, authentic core, like and you need someone who's gonna look after that and make sure I mean, that's what we have good editors at Dynamite too. I mean, I'm across everything, but at this point, Joe and Matt, like they know, like they're not gonna let things get too far off. Like they've
Mhm.
got good editors kind of shepherding on the front lines. And yeah, I was happy also with the movie. I mean, the movie
Mhm.
is definitely its own fresh, original
Mhm.
story. It's its own take on the character. MJ wanted to do her own thing,
Mhm.
but the core of the character is it's very much her.
Mhm.
It's very much her. Like the what you love about Sonja, you are going to see on the screen.
I think it's correct me if I'm wrong, is Matilda excuse me. Matilda Lutz
Yeah.
is gonna be
And
the new
the
Red
thing
Sonja.
about the thing about Matilda is, we cast her. We looked at a lot of actresses. Like we looked
Mhm.
at a lot of performers, and I was an early proponent of Matilda. I
Mhm.
was the one when we were down, I was the one when we were down to top 25, I'm like, it's Matilda. And when we
Mhm.
were down to the top five, I'm like, it's Matilda.
Yeah.
And I'm
I mean, that's not an endorsement. I don't know what is.
well, it was just sort of there's
Mhm.
something you just kind of know when you know.
Right.
And she's to me, the character isn't just about like the character is about the spirit and the heart
Mhm.
of that's what Matilda brings to it. And I'll say she sort of proved it too
Mhm.
during the film process, because like it was a no frills production for
Mhm.
sure. And that woman did not complain once. Like
Mhm.
she toughed it out. There
Mhm.
were nights they were shooting in fall, in artificial rain, in like early October, and it dropped and it was freezing, and
Oh
this,
man.
she's running around in what Red Sonja wears,
Yeah.
and you just, but never, always ready to go again. Oh, like she's tough. I don't think you would necessarily like, if you're watching her on like the Netflix show where she plays the most beautiful woman in the world. I don't remember what show that is. You might
Mhm.
not know it. You might not know
Yeah.
just like, you've got like a tough Italian woman who
Mhm.
just like will like and she didn't there's no prima donna in her. There's
Mhm.
an authenticity there that I think really connected. And we ultimately like, it's weird because like I think going into this, I don't think she knew much about the character. I don't think
Mhm.
she knew the comics. um I gave her a lot of that stuff
Mhm.
to study up, but like it went the other way. It wasn't like someone who was read up on it and then figured out how to perform the character. It was more like someone who already had the qualities and that I was looking for,
Mhm.
like without having to prep on the character. Like she didn't need to
Mhm.
read all the old Marvel stuff and the Dynamite runs or like Oming stuff, or like she didn't need to read that in order to bring the right energy to the character. It's kind of the energy she already has as a person in a lot of ways.
Just based on what you're describing, kind of reminds me of how I would hear people talk about Christopher Reeve Superman, like how like he just that was Superman. Like it was like that's actually very exciting to hear. I feel like it was one of those things like Red Sonja was one of those things that I grew up with as a movie, and I loved it. I mean, it's one of those. It's also one of those things. It's kind of also one of those I go back and look at like, oh yeah, definitely. This is this is a movie that came out at the time it came out. I wanted to see something that was closer.
It is super campy.
Yeah.
And that's what you love about the 85 film. We wanted to really do our own thing with the new movie. It just, the old movie was what it was. It was fun for what it was. We wanted to do our own thing.
I know with Birth of the She-Devil, that's kind of like the bookend point, but and I know you can't give away too much with this, without spoiling anything for this book. But it sounds like as far as like chapters and things like that go in Sonja's life, is there I'm assuming there's going to be the potential there to kind of tell more stories kind of in the same vein like earlier Red Sonja stuff. Readers, like newer readers, can kind of jump in on and kind of catch up right along with what's going on currently.
I mean, I know we're going to launch. I know Amy Chu's doing it. I don't know if I'm breaking news here. I know Amy Chu's doing it.
I'll check it in post and I'll hit the siren if we do.
Yeah, I mean, yes, we come up with our sort of plans in terms of our publishing plans with Dynamite. It's almost like a year by year thing.
Okay.
And to be blunt, it's actually, we'll be figuring it out next week, because like our tradition is a Comic-Con. Because that's where we can do this over Zoom and all the rest, or we can do it over beers at the hotel at Comic-Con. And like, Joe and I have a bit of a tradition. It's either lunch or beers at the end of the day. And we kind of put our heads together and figure out what the plan is for the next year. And Comic-Con, I've been going since I was, for about 20 years now. So it's a home away from home for me. So it's like a very comfortable, it feels like a very like appropriate space to just like meet a person, sit down, get drunk, and figure out what are we doing next? What's next? What's next year? What are we doing?
I like the idea of like because it's not to say that Red Sonja is like real big on like sword and sorcery. A lot of kind of a lot of medieval fantasy always kind of popping off. The idea of like what she's up against in this, I feel like it's fertile ground. It's definitely fertile ground. I like it. It just the idea of the bloodless, a character that is kind of, I guess, morally ambiguous.
Yes. and yet charming.
Yeah.
and he's a charming villain. And dramatic and theatrical, and like there's lots of I love this character. But yeah, Death and the Devil, you're always looking for fertile ground, right? Like you're always trying to figure out where's some real estate that hasn't been like tilled on. Where's some fresh soil? And that's part of the reason I'm looking at this whole part of her. I think anything I write at this point forward on Sonja is going to be in these sort of like teenage to early 20s kind of period for her, where she's still, like it just, because for some reason it's like we never really got into it. And like that's why I want to get into it. That's going to be and that's where this lives. That's where Birth of a She-Devil lives. If you like Birth of a She-Devil, you'll like this. It was, and here's the other thing I'll say. Like I wrote this because it's a story I felt compelled to tell. I don't personally write much of her stuff anymore. I only write when inspiration strikes. Like there's got to be. I don't have any like obligation. It's not like I have to write something this year or something like that. It's really more, if I'm going to write it myself, it's because I have a story that I feel like I want out there and that needs to be told. And I got inspired and I think it's a good story. I mean, that's the only reason to do it.
I like that answer. Yeah, like I said, you didn't strike me as the type of person who just write something just to be writing. It's not just just because, like,
And then you got to
yeah.
find the right artist to tell it with you.
Yeah,
Like you don't even, I don't even like, you're not going to move forward until you get the right guy.
yeah.
Until we had Sergio on Birth, like I
Mhm.
didn't really like, I had the idea for the story, but I didn't put pen to paper until I knew I had Sergio. And it's the
Mhm.
same thing here. I didn't put pen to paper until I knew how I had Alberto,
Mhm. Well, like I said, I can definitely attest. Birth of She-Devil is beautiful. It's a beautiful book. The thing that actually has me very excited, probably more than most things, is but like the way the action was depicted, that Sergio did in Birth was just like, it was awesome. It was just really cool seeing Sonya be like,
Yeah, I was
be the
the
badass
way I was
she's to be.
the way I look at Sonya
Mhm.
is like, do you ever see the movie Yojimbo?
Oh yeah,
Uh,
oh yeah.
and like what I like about it is like when he pulls his sword out, all hell breaks loose.
Hmm.
Like it's just like it can be very quiet and still, but it's like the second the sword comes out, all
Hmm.
hell breaks loose. And like and then it's over,
Yeah.
right? And then he puts it back and people are lying dead all over the place and whatever. That's what I like to do with Sonya action is like it's like when that shit comes out, some people are gonna die,
Yeah.
and then it's gonna go back in the like that's I always just love that. It was just
It's a thing of beauty to just witness. Like I said, when I read through it, yeah. I was like, this is it. I was like, this is it. This feels right.
dude, the opening scene
Yeah.
where she's like pretending to be I'll spill a little. Like
Yeah.
she's pretending to be a virgin sacrifice
Mm.
she's infiltrating the cult and she's listening to the idiot in front of her talk about how she can't wait to go meet her God,
Mm.
and she just uses it like and then the moment hits where the violence starts and all hell breaks loose. Like that was so much fun to write. I thought of it that scene. I thought of like the moment. I thought of the whole project. I thought of that scene.
Well, I'm like man, I'm gonna go say it right now. I'm looking forward to the September 11th is when the first issue will be dropping. I'm gonna say right now, there'll be links for everyone who is watching this. Go click that link. It will be in the description. Pinned comment below. Go check it out. It's gonna be a wild ride. I can promise you that. And if
Never a
you
dull moment.
yeah.
Never.
And I I will also say go to your local comic shop as well and ask to have it put in your pull box because that
Yes.
is a thing you can
Support the world.
totally
Support
do.
the local comic shops. We are
Yes.
lucky as an industry to have them.
Yes.
Print media is not the easiest thing, and these
Mm,
guys have stuck it out. They stuck it out through COVID. They
mhm,
stuck it out through all kinds of changes in distribution. I mean, I all the respect in the world to the retailers. And
mm,
like, yes, if you can go to a store and buy it from them,
mhm.
please do that.